Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with David Brad Talton from Level 99 Games, the publisher of many popular titles, including the recent smash hit Dead by Daylight, which has exceeded over $1 million in funding on Kickstarter. He goes by Brad. Brad, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, it is great. I got so excited when you agreed to come on the podcast. I mean, it's not often you get to talk to people that have done large campaigns like this has and as fun as high as this, but not only that is the history and the number of campaigns. We're going to get into this on the podcast.
Yeah, it's not often you get to do a campaign.
I know, right? So you talk to people who've done 2 or 3. We talk to somebody who's done like 24. Man, it's cool because there's a lot of insight. There's a lot of gold in there that hopefully we're going to pull out in the next 30 minutes. So thank you so much for your time. For those who don't know you, maybe you can give us a kind of a quick background as to kind of what you do at Level 99 Games. Obviously, you're in charge, but kind of where that all started, the whole Level 99 Games.
Yeah, so we started this up back in about 2011, and I was just working on my own as a contract programmer making iPhone apps. And I'd always been into board games. I designed games all through college, all through my youth, and I played them with my parents and not my cousins. And then I got to college and I was like, oh, there's a real industry here. That's cool. I can like collect all these games. And then 2011 came around and I saw Kickstarter appear, and I saw actually TMG fund Imminent Domain on Kickstarter. And I was like, well, I could do that. And so I put up the game that I was working on at the time. That was the first BattleCon game. And it funded. I think it raised about $25,000.
Yep.
And I only lost about $15,000 on it. So it was a smash success for my first project.
Yeah, to get to 5 digits on your first campaign is quite an accomplishment. And in 2011, like that's like right at the beginning, right? When people started first going on Kickstarter with board games. What was the environment like back then? Like, was it kind of just you, or did you see too many other games?
I mean, it was the Wild West, right? Like we didn't have like stretch goals. We didn't have like early birds. Like all these incentives came around like after, like as I was watching the platform unfold. Like we just like stretch goals were kind of discovered around the time of my first project. And so we introduced a couple stretch goals late in the project. And like, that's the kind of era it was. We were discovering these things and our fans were like, hey, you've already funded. Shouldn't you give us more stuff? And we're like, okay, sure. We'll make up some more stuff to give you. And we did. That was the era that it was. And like we didn't have any of the big CMONs or like giant $1 million campaigns. We didn't have a ton of like the scandals. People weren't as cautious about backing a project, and you could really just as an indie show up with your idea and do it. And things have changed a lot since then. Not that you can't these days, but it's definitely a lot harder to show up with a brand new idea, and with the level of graphic design that I had or didn't have back then, and still make it. So so it was a neat time. And when we continued to work and compound on that success, and our second project was like 40K, and then our third project we finally broke 100, and then it went on, and finally I think our first really big breakout success was Millennium Blades, which is a board game about collectible trading card games. You're a CCG player and you collect cards and play against the other players in a board game format. So anyway, we did that, and that was a kind of our first big success. But we never broke $1 million on a project after 24 projects. So I would kind of say it's a story of of not quite like smash success, but of this sort of enduring success. Like we made it without a huge breakout hit for 10 years. And that's kind of cool too.
So how many were you? So is that like, I guess 2.5 games on average per year, or campaigns you were doing, or how many campaigns a year were you doing?
Yeah, we had a lot of campaigns. A lot of those campaigns are reprints, so
Okay.
it's not always a new game. Sometimes it's just a new expansion or even just a mini expansion
Yeah.
and a reprint. Because we as a small company, we didn't have great distribution options open to us, so we couldn't just reprint and have somebody like Asmodee foot the bill for the reprint. We had to fund it all ourselves. And that's a big deal when you're a small company.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
That's
but
crazy. And when it's interesting when I was kind of doing the research before we before today, and I was looking at that first campaign because I wanted to see the evolution. Because again, it's not often you talk to somebody like there's a lot of people I've talked to that 2014, 2015 kind of got in around then. You might be the earliest, I think, person campaign I've talked to. So I don't even think Jamie Stagmeyer even started that far. I think he was even 2012, maybe 2013.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but so I was looking at the evolution of that first campaign and the amount of graphic you had versus now, and it is leagues and leagues apart. And you can see obviously there's been learnings along the way. Do you reflect back on your prior campaigns and say, gosh, what can we do to level this one up, or this is maybe what worked and let's carry that forward? Or what's your approach?
Yeah, I mean, in our organization, and there's like five of us that are working
Yeah.
full time, and a bunch of part timers and contractors as well. Um, but we always take a look back at each project and have a post-mortem, and everybody writes down all the things that they think went really right or really wrong, and we compile all those together and we distribute them to the whole team, and we have a big discussion like, here's what we want to change with our next project, here's what went right for us, here's what didn't work so well. And it's in all spheres. It's in the customer service, it's in the production process, it's in the marketing. Every aspect of this we've kind of codified and built a process around. So we really have, and I'd say this is an innovation of maybe even just the last 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
but we have an operating process that we use to build and get these games out, and we're constantly trying to improve on it. So yes, I'd say, but I would say the introspection is fairly recent. And you can see that in the early years, there's not a lot of improvement.
Yeah.
It's just whatever I learned naturally, because I was doing most of the graphics back then. So,
And then
yeah.
have you found that, I mean, again, the number of games, number of titles you guys have had, how have you handled the distribution? So, I mean, obviously you have your website where people can buy through there, and you've got, the Kickstarter platform. But if you had to kind of build out, I imagine you would have had to build out an infrastructure globally, right? To kind of handle your games ongoing. And what does that look like
Yeah.
for you guys?
Well, it's changed a lot in the past few years.
Yeah.
So we've had, so first off, let me say that like 80 to 90% of the business is direct to consumer sales. And that's how it's been pretty much since the start. We had a distribution agency, what we call a consolidator in this industry, called Impressions Advertising.
Okay.
Previously Wizards Attic, now they're Flat River Group, or they were recently bought by Flat River Group, and they would keep all of our games, floor those, and sell them to retailers and distributors on consignment for us. Recently, we have gone to exclusive distribution with Asmodee. So Asmodee owns all of our like English B2B, like business to business type of sales. So they sell to the retailers on our behalf. They sell to other like international distributors, the English editions on our behalf. And that works really well because they're actively going out and making calls and learning about the games. I actually got to go up to Asmodee's office last week and meet their sales team and play some of our games with them. And there's such cool folks. It was a lot of fun. It was really neat. And they're all really knowledgeable too. Like I got to learn a lot by talking to them about how the global distribution and even how national distribution works. So it was super fun.
Did they reach out to you, or did you reach out to them, or how did that relationship come together?
Yeah, I reached out to them through a friend who had told me about his good experience working with Asmodee.
Yeah.
So yeah, and and it took us a couple months to get it all squared away. They've been having a lot of changes of their own, but we got it set up, and now when we want to print a new run of a game, we don't have to go to Kickstarter. We can say, hey, Asmodee, will you buy like 3,000 of the new game? And, and then we add on, however many thousand we want for our direct to consumer business, and, and order them all at once, split them at port. And it's a much easier, easier thing for us to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Especially with the shipping, right? So,
mhm.
and I think we're seeing a lot of publishers do this now, right? Where, even 3 years ago, there was a model where you could try to do it all yourself, right? And say, okay, I'm going to try split this up. I'm going to try and maximize my profit by setting up these direct relationships with these distributors around the world, or even retailers in some cases. And the costs have been so insane over this past year and a half, and they keep climbing, that I think it's forcing a lot of people to kind of relook at the model, right? And look at it differently and say, okay, is there partnerships maybe we can set up that will help us make this more efficient? Or is there ways that we can consolidate it to make it more efficient? Because I think that model of the past of saying, I'm going to take care of these kind of direct relationships around the globe is really risky, right? It's really risky.
Well, and it's really good when you have a large partner that is globally connected, because they buy your games, like EX Works. You deliver it at port, and and it's theirs at that point, and you don't have to worry about the shipping or timelines or et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, global logistics has always been a challenge for a company our size.
Yeah.
And we found a lot of great partners over the years, but it has been a challenge, and I think it'll continue to be, as especially in light of current events.
Yeah.
Everything's real up in the air, and you just have to trust your partners. I think that's what it comes down to, is good partners you can trust.
So speaking of partners, Dead by Daylight. So when did this whole thing start? Like, when did the idea start of kind of adapting the video game, and like, how did this all come about?
Yeah, so it was early summer last year, actually.
Oh, that's soon. Okay, that's not that far away. Yeah.
No, it was quite recent, and we, my team, like here in the office, we were getting into Dead by Daylight, and I was like, well, I could just, I had a cool idea for a game. And I said, well, I'll send them an email and see what happens. And it turns out they were actually shopping for a game. They were engaging with publishers and talking about it. And so I was the publisher that actually had a prototype to show them at that time. And they played the prototype, really enjoyed it. We talked a bit more. We said, we could deliver in October 2022, but we got to start now. And they said, okay, let's do it. And so we started working on the game, and and it's been really cool. Behavior Interactive is actually also a Canadian company, so they're based up there with y'all. And it was. It's been really neat. I guess I don't know like where to start talking about all the details of licensing, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let me throw a couple at you here. So first of all, I kind of want to just pick apart a little bit of what you're talking about there, because I love the details of these kind of things. I find it just fascinating. So you approach them with an idea for how to basically make a board game out of their video game IP. And you had an idea for a game. Was the game idea already set up specifically for Dead by Daylight, or was it a game idea that was generic that could have been skinned with different themes?
When I'm playing any kind of video game, because video game board games is kind of what we do. So when I'm playing any kind of video game, I design a board game for it. Sometimes that just lives in my notebooks, but I always do this as part of my recreation, is I design the board game. And so I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks full of designs. Some of these designs keep cycling around. Some of these designs are specifically made for a very specific process. And this game was specifically Dead by Daylight. And and it was, when I say like I had an idea, I mean, I had a playable tabletop simulator module and a playable, like physical edition that we played out here in our office. And so we got to like version 3 or 4 of this game before I started actually pitching it to behavior before I said, well, this is good enough that somebody might actually want to spend money on this. Let's try and show it off.
So you'd already skinned it with their artwork and the game theme and everything prior to bringing it to them?
Yeah, I mean, for our own internal testing, right?
Yeah.
Like this is just us having fun at the office. So
Sure.
I put whatever graphics I want on. And and I go on the fan wikis and stuff and dive into all the little details to get everything right. So it was the process of me becoming a fan as I put together this game as well. And yeah, so we did about 3 more versions after the contract was accepted and locked in, and started putting together all the artwork and graphic design and everything like that. And we go through the approval stage, get everything approved by their brand department, and then marketing. And marketing is something that really threw me for a loop, because I had never worked with an organization before, and I've worked with some pretty large international brands like Capcom and such, and I'd never worked with an organization that was as brand aware as Behavior was. Like, they knew exactly what they were and what they stood for and how it's described and how it's not described, and what channels you use, and and everything to talk about this brand. And it was so interesting to learn so much about it, about all the things that they do. And they have a huge PR and marketing department.
Yeah.
And we had this 5-person team of us had to kind of plug into that, and they had like a 5-person team assigned to us. So the media breakout that they had for from their company was as large as our whole company.
Yeah.
It was kind of surreal, but they were really cool to work with, and they guided us in all these things. And my only regret is that we didn't start earlier. I think we on our side could have started a lot earlier, but we spent a lot of time sort of finding our footing working with a larger brand. And now in the future, when we go into future projects, I think we're going to be able to use all that knowledge to hit the ground running a lot better, especially on our own projects.
Yeah.
We can replicate a lot of what Behavior was teaching us in our own future projects.
What did they change? So, I mean, you're a board game expert.
Mm-hmm.
They're experts at the video game. You come to them with an idea, say, okay, here's how we think this would play out as an actual tactile physical board game.
Mm-hmm.
Was there changes? Did they say like, okay, but you got to change this, or you got to change that, or how did that discussion go?
Most licensors are not very hands-on, right? Most licensors are like, here's the artwork, you put the logo in the right place and the copyright line is great, so you're good to go. And they don't even play the game. That's because it's just they completely, they're like, you're the expert, do it. With Behavior, like the senior staff were actually also board gamers. And so they wanted to play it and see that they liked it and that it represented the brand. So we actually got like, the lead designer, and the brand managers and some of the creative directors all together to play the game with us, and they had a great time with it. And they gave us some suggestions, and we integrated those suggestions. But it was just little things. It was just little things about make this more smooth, make this a little more intuitive. This feels rough around the edges, and and they're right. Like it was a prototype, and we when we make those changes and we smooth everything out, and but they were really cool with it. They didn't demand that it was a certain kind of game. What they said was, you guys are experts and we expect you to represent the brand. And we're going to check that you do. And that's what it was.
And as a licensor, they're going to sign off on everything. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a lot of back and forth on a lot of things. And like I said, because they're very specific about the brand. Like, these words need to be capitalized. Like, these words don't need to be capitalized. Like, you can describe, this, like the situation that the characters are in like this, but not like that. And so there was a lot of specifics, especially in the like non-mechanical text of the game.
Got it.
They had real specific requirements. So it was not a rubber stamp process.
So, and I'm showing on the screen for people that are watching either live or on the replay. Can you give us kind of the gist of how to play the board game part of this? I mean, obviously it's a quick overview, but give people an idea and try to use descriptive language if you can for those that are just listening of how you would play a board game version of this IP.
Yeah, well, let me give you the overview of the IP first
Sure.
to start
Yeah,
off
that's a
with.
good point.
For those that don't know, yeah, so Dead by Daylight is a video game. It is a what I would say, I guess they describe it as high stakes hide and seek, but one player is a killer and the other four players are survivors, and you are all trapped in a labyrinth together. The killer is trying to capture you, wound you, and sacrifice you to this mysterious entity. The survivors are trying to fix generators, which will power up an exit gate to let them escape the labyrinth. And so it's kind of an arcade style game in that, you'll sit down and you'll play 3 or 4 rounds of this and you'll get matched up against different players. And it's a very bite-sized sort of game. And that was the, sort of what we tried to replicate with the board game. We wanted a game that you could play in a single sitting, that it was quick and quite quick to set up and to teach, and that you could immediately roll into a second game if you wanted to. So in the game, it's an asymmetric 3 to 5 player game. 2 to 4 players play as the survivor team. 1 player plays the killer. Each of these sides has distinct personalities. There's 16 killers, 17 different survivors. They all have different powers. They all have different strategies. Especially the side that the killer plays really affects both sides and how they're going to strategize and counter strategize. The game is a secret movement prediction game. So at the start of the round, everybody will select where they're going to move in that turn. Then each of the survivors makes their move. And for the survivors, this is a coordination game. You're trying to get together with other survivors so that you can heal each other, so that you can work on the generators, so that you can gather at the exit gates to escape, or so that you can hide from the killer and predict their movement and try to counter them. On the killer's side, so after all the survivors go, the killer takes a turn. And the killer's goal is to find and tag the survivors. And once you tag someone, they become wounded. And once they're wounded, if you tag them again, you can pick them up and carry them to a hook and drop them on the hook. And then they're stuck there until one of their friends comes to get them off.
Yeah.
And so for the survivors, each time you finish a generator, you get progress on a track. And once 4 generators are done, you can open the exit gate and escape. And at that point, all the survivors win together, whether you're on a hook or not. If you open the exit gates, you all win. For the killer, every time somebody goes on a hook, at the end of the turn, you get 1 progress towards your ritual for each survivor that's on a hook. You also get a bonus the first time you hook each different survivor. So you're incentivized not to chase down just one person. It's nice to, spread the aggression around a bit, keep everybody on their toes. So if that track fills up before the survivors escape, then the killer wins. Yeah. And that's the basics. Each of the killers has cool, unique powers. Like there's a guy with a spear gun that can shoot off and reel you in. There's actually this pair of conjoined twins that can separate and they attack in tandem from 2 different sides of the field. There's a guy who can electroshock you, and it messes with your ability to interact with the generators and with other props in the arena. So there's a ton of variety for every possible killer that you can play. And I guess I'd say the other interesting and innovative thing about the game is props. So in the game board, is this kind of connected web of spaces. And in these spaces are a bunch of face down tiles called props. And when your character doesn't have innate abilities to do stuff, it's more that when you're in a space, the props that are there determine what you can do. And at the beginning of the game, all the props are hidden. As you move around and explore and cross paths with other survivors, you'll reveal more and more and more. So at the beginning of the game, you have very few options. But by the mid to late game, you have a lot of options on every turn you reach. And that really allows the game to be taught as you play. You don't have a lot of options at the beginning. Every time we flip a tile, we can explain what it does.
It gives you a little bit of the video gamey kind of feel too, right? As you're kind of searching for lack of a better word, resources and props and things like that to use as you're trying to escape. The mechanic of the this kind of blind playing reminds me a little bit of Colt Express kind of. Is that fair? Everybody kind of plays their card and they're revealed at the same time, and that determines who's moved where?
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we all select at once and then we each reveal in turn and play. And the
Yeah.
killer always goes last. So,
Ah,
as a survivors, you're trying to predict what your other survivors are doing and what the
right.
killer's doing so you can avoid the killer and collaborate with survivors. And as a killer, you're trying to predict what the survivors are doing, um, and so that you can chase them down.
Yeah.
And we played a lot of games that were like full hidden information, like Scotland Yard style.
Okay.
So that was kind of the original version, and when we pitched it, we actually called it like cooperative murder battleship to behavior, and they enjoyed that a bit. But we had like full hidden movement where there were no pieces on the board. You made your moves on a sheet, on a secret movement sheet. But what we found is that the game is interesting when you're being chased by the killer,
Hmm.
and it's not interesting if the killer doesn't find you or if you go the whole game without getting in a chase.
Yeah.
So in order to keep that tension, what we really had to do was reveal everybody's position at the end of every turn. So with this secret movement and with the survivors go first and the killer goes last, there's exactly one turn of uncertainty at any given time. And that always means that if you get away, you're getting away for this turn, and that's it.
Yeah. It sounds awesome. And I think for people that are playing the video game, from the sense I get from, watching the playthrough videos and so forth and the reviews and everything, which is very, very complimentary of what you guys put together here. You guys have really captured the essence of the game, right? Of the video game, but in a
Yeah.
very tactile medium.
What I've seen is that the players who play Dead by Daylight really get into it. Like
Yeah.
they because this is a game where you have a lot of memes and a lot of culture around it, and those come out in the board game. What I really think is the big point of this game is that people who love Dead by Daylight can play this game with people who don't know Dead by Daylight, and they can introduce
I
another
gotcha.
like section of their friends to what they love.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it's all about.
That's a good point. I mean, when I was looking at the campaign, and I'm showing on the screen for people that are watching on the replay or live, the amount of minis you have in this game is crazy. Like you get a good number of minis. I think is it like 12 or 14 in the base game, and then
It's 13 in the base.
and then if you get the expanded version, so the kind of, I guess it's like the deluxe or whatever.
Mhm.
It is 17 survivor minis and 16 killer minis. Like there's a lot of plastic
And
in
then
this game, eh?
and then there's generators. So the generators you can repair have minis, and they actually like plug in little
The hooks as
pistons
well,
as they
yeah.
start to. And then the hooks, there's hooks for the minis, and the survivors actually hook onto the minis, or hook on, like you can actually hook the survivors onto the hooks physically, and they hang there when once you've caught one.
Oh, that's cool.
It's quite neat. And so there's close to 40, a little bit upwards of 40 minis in the collector's edition.
Yeah.
Most of those being unique sculpts.
Yeah, I
So
didn't notice the actual pistons that you can plug into the machine, but I see them now down below. I think that is it's cool. And when you look at your pledge breakdown, the majority of your funding was actually at the collector's edition, right? Like that's
Yeah.
where people were like, no, I want it all.
Well, this is the kind of Kickstarter exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Or at least our direct exclusive. We don't like to make it so that you'll never get this content again, but we do say that like this is what's available from us, versus what's going to go to retail stores.
Sure.
So we didn't have stretch goals on this project. We didn't have a bunch of exclusives except for it's while supplies last, on the collector's edition. We didn't have like a ton of early birds or FOMOs or whatever else is. It was
Sure.
a really straightforward campaign. $50 tier you get the retail edition, $100 you get the collectors, and if you miss the collectors on Kickstarter, it's 130 in our online store while supplies last. And so so it's easy to go all in for $100 on this project.
Oh, absolutely. How did you? So I'm showing on the screen here. So you guys hit. I'm gonna put this in Canadian dollars because it always sounds larger. You had 11,546 backers, 1 million, almost 1.1 million dollars in funding. I'm sure once Pledge Manager happened and kind of the orders afterwards, I know those numbers even ballooned further, even post campaign. But what I found interesting is I looked at the target was $250,000, which is far larger than even some of your prior campaigns where you ended up, what drove the 250, and how confident were you guys going in that you're going to be able to hit that? Because it's a big target, 250.
It's a real target. I mean, that's what it was going to take. When you do a lot of miniatures and a lot of unique sculpts, you have a large fixed cost that you have to overcome.
Dies and everything.
We were really confident in the product. We loved it. We knew that Behavior was totally on board with us, and that they were going to contribute a lot of marketing, and that the community was going to get really excited about this. So we had a lot of data to back up, our bold claim. Also, I really like to do a real goal and not say, oh, well, it's like 10,000 and, we're going to guarantee success. I like to put a number that communicates to the fans, like, this is what it actually costs to make this game.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's kind of what Kickstarter is really all about, is that sort of honesty. And that's the same reason we decided not to do stretch goals, not to do all of these extra things, because the real goal of this project was to make it an all-in for $100 and to deliver it this year. And that was the big deal.
That's aggressive too.
You don't see a lot of Kickstarters that do that. I think that honestly, like, it's very easy to make a game that's too big to play and delivers 3 years late. I've done it myself quite a few times. So I really wanted to make a game that was just the right size to play, and it delivered, on a fast schedule.
Yeah.
So
no, and clearly it's delivered. So if people want to kind of follow along with your company as you guys, continue to come with new games and new IPs, is there one social channel you guys try to focus things around for people to kind of follow and participate, or how best do they do that?
Yeah, so our most active channel is actually our Discord server.
Oh, cool.
And on our Discord server, you can meet fans, you can play in live events. We have events twice a week that are actually curated events, and we have just pop-up fan events almost every night where you can go on and play with folks around the world, learn the games. It's a great community. Everyone's real nice. And we're really, really excited to invite anybody that's interested in trying one of our games to come and learn it there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and you can reach the Discord from our website, www.level99games.com. Just go down the community tab and it's right there.
And is there so obviously you guys, I mean, you're cranking out a couple games a year. There's got to be something coming down the pipe. Can you give us a teaser of what you guys are working on next, or what people can kind of look for? Or?
Yeah, well, our next priority is, of course, to deliver Dead by Daylight, and we're really going to be fully focused on that for the next few months. But by the end of the year, we are really hoping to launch a role-playing game, our third role-playing game in history. That is going to be a pretty unique game. It's called Adventures at Argent, and it's based on the magical school setting that we created for one of our board games, Argent University. And yeah, it's got a lot of cool stuff. I won't talk your ear off with it, but it ships in a backpack, and the course prospectus is your core book, and it comes with the city magazine, which is like your world book, and it comes with a big fold out map of campus that you can spread out on your wall or your table as you play. So it's got a lot of real physical, cool feeling materials. And your student planner is your student day planner is your character sheet, and you go on adventures by filling that out.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, I hope you can come back on the podcast and talk about that game when it's ready. Love to have you back. All the best in this coming year. My gosh, you guys are just crushing it. Congratulations on this IP. And thanks again for coming on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.